It's with real pleasure that I introduce Marjorie Power to you. When Betsy and I were in, we spent the winter in Guanajuato, Mexico. This is where I did a lot of the editing on this book. And Marjorie went to San Miguel, which was a town not too far from Guanajuato. And even though I did not meet her there, we were emailing back and forth about the culture in Mexico, about fault lines and this and that. So it was a real pleasure meeting her for the first time today. And I love her bio. Marjorie wrote this about herself. Marjorie is a widely unknown poet. Now everybody knows her along the West Coast. Her poetry appears in many anthologies and journals, as well as 7 small collections from small presses.
First of all, I want to thank Toni for accepting my work and for befriending me and all of us and creating this group. I appreciate being part of it because of a couple of geographical moves relatively late in life. Not that I don't have a lot left, I hope I do, but in recent years I've moved twice, and so what poetry community I have is scattered. And people live in other places that I'm still very close to, but I don't have what you keep talking about here in Eugene. So it's nice to be in this event and feel like I'm part of it. My Fault Lines poem is called Secondhand Smoke, and I'm going to read it last. I'll read other ones first. On wanting to help a friend. If he hadn't let his lawn go brown, if dry grass explained his illness, if the sight of dahlias were its cure, if his doctor, the one who retired, if I keep moving my sprinkler, if I get on an airplane and go there, if yellow, russet, magenta, gold, if I could mail this light, this pear of an afternoon, this Italian oil painting come to life, this work of breath old enough to have crocodile skin. If breath in September would concentrate on huge gnarly trees with impossibly tangled roots. Why I knit? Because a phone rings in someone's purse. Because I hate noise. Because I am lost by conversation. Because conversation is a layer of earth that covers an underground stream. Because I delight in spring but belong to autumn, to color, to deep and pale shades of turquoise. I'm hopelessly in love and want to make something of it. A sweater, a hat, a blanket for a newborn whose name I embroider in the binding. Because I hear water and lose track of words. This leads to restless hands. Faith in the color turquoise. Again the sun is falling off the desert's edge. But don't be afraid if your shadow grows vast and insatiable. Dawn restores us to our little arrangements. Secondhand smoke. This one's a little longer than the others. Your match flares. The others you invited to lunch tip the waitress and rise, a small flock of polite excuses. A 70-something gambler who quits while he's ahead. His shiny-headed friend who exudes empathy around the table. A skinny 17-year-old blue-eyed Buddhist who helped you drive all the way out here to the coast. Now an elderly soul who used to teach with Stanley Kunitz back when Bennington was a force to reckon with. Bobby lingers, leaves his sweet touch on my shoulder. Your cigarette glows, we're alone, chimichanga plates removed. Among plastic snapdragons and canned Mexican songs. Beneath glass chilies and parrots that repeat nothing. You lean closer, lower your voice. Bobby lived for a while in a cabin, maybe 20 miles east of Portland. In those days, he was Madame Chang. Madame Chang wore silk dresses, slit up the side, and a wig with chopsticks. She played piano every night in a Portland bar. This next part is where Jeff comes in. He and Bobby just celebrated their 40th. Jeff enjoyed that bar. It was posh. He hadn't seen the likes of it in Little Rock. Jeff fell in love with Madame Chang. He'd never heard such music, never seen such a woman.
And our next poet and reader is Jenny Root from here. Jenny's work has been published in Basalt, Windfall, which is a great magazine and place in Portland, Bill Silverley's journal, went into their 10th year actually. Hipfish, Fireweed, Poetry International, and other literary journals, as well as in the anthology New Poets of the American West.
And it's just really a treat to hear everyone's voices. Marjorie and Brigitte and people from outside of the area that I haven't had the chance to hear before. It's a real treat. And so I thought I would start with the poem In Fault Lines. It's called Marriage. We almost gave up, your grandfather and I. But in those days, you didn't just pack your things and move across town when your husband's anger swallowed you. Besides, neither of us grasped the world on our own. Coffee with cream, the sun, the moon. Yin and yang, I think you call it. Oh, we slept and rose together, his days near the telephone calling customers, and mine spent answering the calls of the children, their little demands, larger dreams. Hour by hour we lived in that house while the years grew up, and now here you are. All you kids are my joy. Your grandfather's love was a hard thing to understand. Bearing it was a love all its own. Still, I couldn't have seen the stars without his darkness. You will see this in your own marriage someday, how the yin and yang of two lives softens one, strengthens the other. In the end, what he thought he'd lost weakened him so I'd long forgiven every slight. For 66 years I followed him, and then he needed me to guide him dusk to dusk. I still followed, his silvery head grown pale, presence fading day by day, until one morning I found myself looking into a mirror where his face had been. Hi, Grandma. Actually, this is another poem that she inspired. It's recent, called Travelers. A deer once, and birds, pulling an animal's corpse from the rush and smear of human travelers seemed the best I could do, cupping a lifeless body in one hand, placing her at the side of the road in a bower of new yarrow. I haven't been so altruistic since, but today a squirrel dashed in front of my car to the busier road. A Toyota punched him into oblivion, his four legs jerking in the air. It wasn't pulling him by the tail to the curb that got me. It wasn't the quarter-sized pool of blood left behind. It was my grandmother, 2 weeks ago in an icy parking lot, moving with quiet focus, her walker still festooned with red ribbons from Valentine's Day. this last poem was also fairly recent. So last year I was going through this refinance of my house, and it was this arduous, ridiculously long process where pay for a refinance, and then the person at the bank I was dealing with left the bank and never closed the loan, and in order to work with him still, you know, I needed another refinance. I said, well, I can't pay for that. So we worked it out where he was going to make the arrangements, and it went on and on and on, and this is into the winter, and finally, the night after the second appraiser came, it was raining and my roof was leaking. Like, there was a leak in the living room. I'm like, oh my God. I thank God that didn't happen earlier when he was here. And so I started writing and free wrote for a while, and it turned into this poem, and this poem refers to the 99% from the Occupy movement. It's called Down Here in the 99. Well, so what if the roof leaks? I'm warm and my powder's dry. I talk tough, but still I pay the mortgage and send the forms to the bank for another refinance. That 1% makes a big difference down here in the 99. You never know when your house will need a new roof, your car a new transmission, or your sister another mastectomy. And this is the upper crust, those of us with houses and jobs and surgeries. Sure, we worked for it. We don't suffer leaks under the freeway bridge or the burning pain of an infected slash in the thumb. Doesn't sound like much until you have one. This is the story of a man I met on shelter night. Thumb wouldn't heal. Lost it to frostbite when the shelters were closed. His backpack was stolen and his bedroll wet. House had gone under when he lost his job, then his wife, and now he wonders where it all went. The furniture, the kids, the softball games. Was it all a mirage? Smoking in the church parking lot. Cold, untold winter moon. Ice gathering on windshields. People blame the banks for the mess we're in, but he doesn't want to blame anyone. Only wants to get back up. Wasn't supposed to be like this, he says. When the roof leaks, you patch it. When you fall down, you get back up. You get back up. We don't ask for much. Thank you.
How can you just not love you Eugene poets? It's amazing. Every poet is so different, and every poem, the themes are different. Everything is just, it's like an open mic. Everything is different. This whole book is like an open mic. It's just one present after another. Wow, you guys are amazing. This is a real pleasure to introduce Sam Roderick to us. Roxas to us. I can't roll my R's. Sam has been, he's part of the Portland community now. He's come up to read with us, and everybody has not only embraced him, but rumor was that we were going to Shanghai him and keep him in Portland. And then Toni found out and spread the word around and said, over their dead body, he's a Eugene treasure. And he really is not only an excellent poet, but he also designed this fabulous flyer, which is being used in San Francisco and Gig Harbor and Seattle, Portland. It's just amazing. So Sam's bio. Sam grew up in Glendale, California, and is working on his first chapbook, Contradiction. He is a member of the Red Sofa Poets. For more information, visit samroderick.com, and here's Sam.
Such a kind introduction. Thank you so much. Everybody see the font? Yeah. It's not real. At the Portland reading, I had a little secret that I shared with everybody, and it wouldn't be fair if I didn't share it with you guys. But the secret is, when I go to poetry readings, I actually want to really connect with the poem, but also I really want to connect with the poet. So I play this thing in my head where I'm actually on a date with them. So I am your 5-minute date, so I invite you to that.
Where did we go?
We're going there right now.
Who's paying?
Right here. Well, Fawn, I was at St. Vincent de Paul's yesterday donating some stuff, and I thought I'd go into the store, and right when I walk into the store, there's this fawn just sitting there. And it was just telling me, you know, carry me on your back, you know, take me home, don't leave me here. I'll teach you a language, fawn language. A boy carries a fallen nest into his orange-lit room, places this slice of heaven next to letters to an imaginary friend in the attic, a girl made of web and shadow. What have we done with times like these? Times when fawn language is the only language there is for boys and girls and those in between. A time when door and lock didn't have the same mother. Times when we opened our eyes in the dark to remember.
Dark is father, is candle, is hold on to the rail, I don't want you to fall.
Today, a man will immerse himself in the river, open his mouth and cry. No known alphabet can carry his voice. Only rage travels well in water. It turns over rock, over fish, over silt, over salt. Father's hat. This is when time and uproot begin to make sense. These hours when wasps make honey in the dark. When father swims in sap for the last time, cursing at stars. Each day getting blinder and blinder. He is hammermouth, palm spitter. Our prayers tell him to find another way out, opposite from us, and to leave our Sundays alone. I'd like to thank Toni Pfannenstiel and Dan Encarnacion, who's up here from Portland, and he designed the cover for the book, and he will also be reading. And I wanted to thank you for coming out tonight on this Saturday to hear poetry. And to those who've never been to a poetry reading, I know you guys are out there. Thank you for coming. Fauna. The riot begins with one eye open. Children shape clay into pigeons. Their brothers wait, impatient. A fauna of fathers, buried face down and feet folded outward, will now come back as birds, hovering. On the other side of the fence, mothers of angry fuckers throw eggs and bread, spit olive oil on each hand, and tickle deep sockets where eyes used to be. The earth inhales, knees will tremble. And I will read a poem that was published here in Fault Lines. New immigrant. It must have been the rift on the side of his head that made him able to let go of years waiting in front of doorstep after doorstep, red light after red light, mother after mother. A decade of authorization letters translated from Coptic to English to Chinese to you. Maybe the bones of his skull never met at birth. In that instant, he remained open to sitting there, unmoved, even when countries lit fire to the trees. Maybe, they say, he is the new immigrant. And the whole month of February, I was in the Philippines. I hadn't been back for 16 years, but I went for a visit to meet my biological mother and biological father, but my biological father died in 1989. And I went there by myself, and it was scary. When a poem can't save you, you must find your mother's pinking shears and set the backyard hammock free. You must watch the threads unfurl in front of you, one by one, and help it along. When a poem can't save you, you must break a crucifix in two and plant the upper half by the kitchen window in hopes that some deer or swallow or swine will notice your sincerity and clear a path in the forest where you will die. When a poem can't save you, you must drink all of the winter wine you've saved in the basement and wait and wait and wait. This is my last poem. And on the 21st of July, I'm reading with Klamath Falls poets Mary Hope, Christina Hackinson, and Chris McGonigal. So that'll be here also for third Saturday poetry here at Tsunami. It's a recent poem, Womb. Womb is a nettle, is a double handshake. This time, it's you doing the holding. Womb is a half-open door during a storm, is tea waiting on the table. Womb is the other mother, the next one, the one who eats twigs and bells for breakfast, who collects lost teeth of 2-year-olds, chiming a rhyme. Womb is a ghost, our keys never to be found in her apron, in her jewelry box. Womb is mouth. Womb is yes, darling. It's yours. Keep it. Thank you so much.
Our next poet reader is Doug Stone from Albany. Doug's poems have appeared in the University of Portland Review, the Oregonian, Cloudbank, and Raven Poetry Journal.
I want to add my thanks to Toni, the two Tonys actually, Toni for jump-starting this wonderful event, and Toni for the journal, and also this wonderful bookstore. I've never been here. I'm from up north, and been to Eugene a lot, but I haven't ever been to this bookstore, but it's on the list now. I'd like to read 3 poems, 2 in the journal, and a third one that wanted to tag along. The first poem, Inferno, it's kind of my take on the concept of poetry and translation. I've always found poetry and translation a little bit of an adventure. It's sort of like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never quite know what you're getting. Inferno, a poem peculiarly perfect in its own language. Christopher Lafarge. Drinking Chianti on a hot afternoon after rain, reading a tortured translation of Dante because I'm too lazy to learn Italian. The wine flows, seeking the beauty of the poem through this desert of words, and gives me just a taste of Dante's perfection in this language I understand, this language that will never really understand Dante without a bottle of wine. And when the wine is finished, that perfection fades like little puddles evaporating in an arroyo, until all that's left are words I understand flopping all over the parched, cracked ground. The next poem, Sydney and the Spider. Sydney is our youngest granddaughter, and ever since the time she could walk, she's been fascinated by spider webs, and particularly after rain or dew, she would just always go to spider webs, and this poem's about the day that she discovered these webs come with a marvelous accessory. Sydney and the Spider. Drawn to the gleaming raindrops, hanging on the web, she sees that dark stillness at the center. The newness of the moment rises in her face like the sun, her sudden smile, eyes widening, eyebrows arching, and then her fingers move so slowly, just like that Sistine ceiling god, toward that stillness that must be touched. The last poem is one I wrote a couple of years ago, it came to mind after, I think it was on Monday, I went to my favorite coffee shop and opened the newspaper and saw these blaring headlines that were at least mildly depressing, that Paul McCartney had turned 70. And it brought to mind this poem I wrote a couple of years ago. I actually wrote 2 years ago, and in December 2010. The granddaughter that's referred to in this poem is Sydney's older sister, Alyssa, who has this incredible gift, but she should have come with a warning to say that she can often make you feel really, really old. Listening to John Lennon 30 years after. It's time again to measure time in dead years, to look at who we think he was, and if he'd lived, imagine who he would be now. So we drag his myth out of death, stuff it full of dim remembrances, then hang it on an ironic cross, like a garish scarecrow on the road to Oz. Isn't that some dead guy singing? My granddaughter asks. But before I can answer, his voice and I capsize in the wake of her contemporary shrug.
And our next poet needs no introduction, however. Charles Thielman recently married on a Kauai beach, the grandfather of 5 free spirits. Charles's Into the Owl Dream Night is available from Utter Chaos Press. Charles.
Thank you. Thank you, Toni, for this marvelous job. And thank you, Toni, for taking the lead on this reading. We have quite a family of poets, actually, in the Willamette Valley here and further out. It's been quite supportive, and anyway, we do have our mini readings and much community. As a matter of fact, this poem from Fault Lines, I have 2 poems in it, and this one I started revising when I was in the Red Sofa Poets, way back when, about 10 years ago. And when I lived in Portland up until 1998, I drove bus, TriMet bus, and I drove a variety of routes. One of my favorite routes was route number 8, which goes up in the northeast, and it also goes, every route has a southern component, also goes up to OHSU, the Hill. But this is about my favorite half of this route. Sometimes it got dicey, but most of the time it was a lot of fun. At one point we had a layover zone, a break zone at Northeast 9th and Deacon. At that time, that was contested gang turf. So you'd be sitting there taking your break, sitting outside having a smoke while all sorts of stuff was going on. And a lot of drugs were being sold at that point. It's called Trafficker. Stepping back from the edge of a street light pool, his lines of preludes are ganglyphs on a wall near his station as he whistles at night traffic. With streetwise finesse, he unsleeves a flick of his right hand, lighter palm catching light, signaling a brother spotter hid behind half-open drapes or twilight. Then he long eyes my stance, my parked, empty, idling bus with two-way radio. The quick cigarette flares within my smoke cloud while I stay between sidewalk and curb. Satisfied that his warning is heeded, he watches for cops and customers. He whistles his teenage octave at slow rolling cars, a toned magnet inviting headlights to bend towards a white-lined silk finale. His eulogy hangs as a dialect pleated into the arms of his dark coat. As I've often said, 98% of the people on that route were just wonderful, just wonderful. I often went after work, I'd go down to a jazz bar. This poem and my last poem are about that. This poem is from this wonderful anthology. 3 copies over there, right next to the donation jar. By the way, I should mention the donations go towards the next issue. Hawk cry, wedding city jazz. Held by habitual love, men of dusk raise oak batons into deaf subito. The blue notes of sax and oboe rising above brick, asphalt, and pulse. Men of dust raise oak batons into deaf subito, conducting current swirl as a sealed falcon climbs, rounding on columns of heat and sweat, homing in on the blue notes of flute and trumpet. Men of dusk grasp at sedge beside the current as men of dust raise oak batons, sensing pain in the serrated glaze of stars. Hawk cry, wedding city jazz, held by habitual love. Men of dusk, men of dust, dance and stride through the convoluted air, raising oak batons into death, subito, breath of cougar, blood of bighorn, bones of whale, sight of osprey, flesh within flesh. These lovers of twilight lean into its liquid flutter, discovering new pain, sweet pain, in the serrated glaze of stars. Hawk cry, wedding city jazz, men of dusk, homing in on the blue notes, true eyes opening in songs of love, anointing the new wings arriving laden, oaked branch surprises of clarity, crest beside the current as a large falcon wheels and dips into our dark blue sky. Thousands turn at the peal of its cry. Edging down into green, these lovers of twilight lean through the birdsong swept air. Men of dusk raise oak batons into deaf subito, blue notes rising from dry benches, rising into a liquid flutter, current pulling matter as the ragged heel into their waltz of hungers. Hawk cry, wedding city jazz. And my last poem is titled Jazz to Opus. This was a renowned jazz bar at Northwest 2nd and Davis in Portland. And it was a great place to just put on the leather jacket and go down after work and catch some jazz. And there was just a wonderful regular crowd there. Jazz to Opus. Carrying spurs of transit staccato, I retreat to hear from driving city bus. Yellow brake squeal turns, eardrum lanced. Hair trigger sidewalks everywhere, everywhere. Heavy hair trigger sidewalks prep for war. Bloods, Crips, cops. Hair trigger sidewalks prep for war, lined with saplings. I retreat through thick wood doors, long fingers thrumming bass, blue drinks slaking August throats. My list of angry speeches left to simmer as guitar burns a mirror of fire, piano smoking. My back relaxing into the sways of this good time crowd, full of color. A tall jazz woman broils a love song and spoons it out, musk sauce brushed into marrow. All of us down for this cool bomb, spooning jazz into full canvas throat, straight from soul onto Scotch burning ice. Oh, she throws her full indigo song into the rhythm thrum floor, fingers snapping, all here, and the specific names of trees ease into murals of shade. The specific names of trees ease into murals of shade, into murals of our children, arms out, waiting for doves, waiting for doves. Thank you.
Now the last but not the least of the poems by Jana ZVIBLEMAN. And she wrote this amazing poem. When I got the manuscript, it was it takes 5 pages of fault lines. And there's not one line that an editor would omit from these poems. It's based upon the William Carlos poem, Plums, which probably all of you know. And when I read it, I literally fell on the floor laughing because it is so humorous and so well done. We did a radio broadcast in Portland last week on KBOO, and this was the last poem that was read, and the moderator of the radio broadcast had us read it in a round, and it was a hoot. People were calling her up, apparently on the radio station, saying they've never heard anything so funny in all their lives. You will really enjoy this. And I love Jana's understated biography. Jana is the poet laureate of her backyard in the mid-Willamette Valley. Married forever, she and her husband always share the plums.
Thank you. I don't know how to say Tony's last name either. Mine is ZVIBLEMAN, but I just use Z. Thank you for potato chips here and chocolate and strawberries and everything. I'll start out with the William Carlos Williams poem because some of us skipped that in high school. This is just to say, I've eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet, and so cold. Can you hear me? No?
No, can you, a little closer to the mic?
Who ate my plums? These are alternative notes on the icebox by different people. I'm telling you for the last time, no, I did not eat your plums, which were in the back of the refrigerator, but why in the world were you hoarding them in the first place? I'm not to blame that we don't share like we used to. Anyway, they were sour, and you've been so cold. Dear, let me tell you again. You keep on saying, I ate the plums. I didn't even go to the icebox. Did we buy plums? Prunes, maybe? We need to eat prunes. There was a coupon around here. Prunes, plums. If there were any at all, you probably ate them yesterday for breakfast. They're good for you. Forgive me, but you tend to be forgetful. So sweet, yet so old. I'd better tell you. Honey, I think the reason you're not finding that container of plum Haagen-Dazs in the freezer that we were saving for something special is I sort of ate it all. Sorry, it wasn't exactly delicious anyway, so old and kind of freezer burned. The next one, if you have page 108, in your lab, you might want to read along or it won't make much sense. There's a name for the genre of using different words that sound like words, and people are amazing. They tell whole fairy tales by heart in this genre, and I was just playing with it. Thesis Justice A. Hi, have eaten a plum, Rottweiler Zindo Eispox. And tissue probably safe ring form Bachfest. Fork if meat, thy war, deal is shush, soak old, rancid wheat. Don't worry about it if you don't get it. I have to say, I've thrown out what used to be my guess is plums in the refrigerator that you're probably saving forever. You should thank me. They were disgusting, so green and so fuzzed. I must say, I cannot believe you ate the plums. Which plums, you ask? You knew perfectly well I was saving them for breakfast. Stop acting so sweetly innocent. Your sorrying is getting so old. This is to report. Yes, the plums had been right there in the middle shelf, officer. No, we did not eat them. My wife was probably saving them for breakfast. I mean, yes, she was. We are sure. Forgive my language, but those fucking burglars were despicable, so sleazy and so cold-blooded. Just talking to myself. I can eat all the plums I want from my icebox for my own breakfast or midnight snack or dinner. Don't need permission from anybody, thank you. Living alone is delicious, so sweet as I get old. Facebook status. All I did was eat some plums, not a reason to unfriend me. Just for your information, I will never eat these plums in the can you put in the pantry. Not for breakfast, not for anything. Excuse me, did you even read this label? They are lethal, so preservative, and so sugared, so out of season, and so not local. Here's what I say, plums, schlums. So they disappeared, forget about it, will you? What do you say, let's go out for breakfast for a change? Then this is my attempt at a text, which you might have to read also. This just to text you. Ate your plums, fridge for breakfast. Too bad. Good, sweet, cold, and I'm moving, own apartment, yay, no roommates, own plums. And the last one, plums, look delicious. Why save them till tomorrow? I'll warm them in the microwave if you'll let me slurp them off your belly.
So awesome to hear you read that. I was able to lip sync that along with her. I read that so many times. It was really good. I have a couple in here, and I will read them. They're short poems. This first one is called The Disrobing. This came about, I was in a monastery when I entered a monastery when I was 14 years old and lived with the monks as a monk trainee for 5 years. And when I was 19, I decided I wanted to disrobe and enter the world and have a family. And the abbot said I was making a terrible mistake. I never looked back. And right after I left the Benedictine Monastery in Kansas, I immediately went to school at Georgetown University with Bill Clinton. We were in the School of Foreign Service together. The difference between Bill and me is I inhaled and he did not. And shortly thereafter, I met Betsy, my wife, who was a nurse at Georgetown University Hospital, and Betsy was also a nun at the time. Her name was Sister Jolene, and fortunately she had already decided to leave the convent, but was still getting permission to be released from her vows. So as I said in this journal, ours was a marriage made in heaven, full of thunder and lightning. This is called The Disrobing. Deep within monastic walls, he wore his thick beliefs like monk's robes, scratchy and warm. They were worn. The young rebel inside decided to disrobe. Warned, he did not listen. He tossed off his beliefs like heavy blankets. The honesty that stripped him naked became his single piece of clothing. He was free to choose new or none, but now he is older. Winds blow colder. He can barely remember how warm he used to feel. This poem is called Meridians. I wrote this about 5 o'clock in the morning last year. It's not too early to write a poem. Sun shines. I woke up only an hour ago. Birds feed. I breakfast on a bowl of words. Breezes stir. Anger and cold angst inside my chest. Coffee warms. Okay, I'm feeling better now. What gives, I take. The morning's moistness smacks me on the back. Wake up before the prime is past and meridians untangle one feeling strand at a time. Quit upbraiding yourself for being alive. All those emotional diagonals and all those other lines converge in love somewhere on the bottom of my feet. And this last poem is called Tom's House. 2 years ago, Betsy and I spent the winter in Mexico, and the sun is just shining there all the time in the Central Highlands. We were at a town about 7,000 feet high, beautiful climate and weather, very dry, blue skies, and it was nice getting away from the clouds in town in Portland and spending time there. And there was an American expat who lived several blocks away named Tom, who was the most miserable person I've met in my life. It was sunny and it was like this black cloud over him, and nothing made him happy. And I found myself going to the other side of the street when I saw him because he was just so negative. And I didn't want to be around negative people. He invited us to his house once, and that was the last time I went to his house. This is called Tom's House. And Tom does not know I wrote this poem about him either. Your skinny house, as thin as you are, with its sallow green complexion. Your ground floor is dark. Overgrown anger pricks those who enter. A second floor for guests remains unfinished. Outside, chickens scratch. Something smells. Your bedroom on the third floor, shared by a cat who lives your solitary life under covers. Floor number 4 has potential. Exposed wood shelters a kitchen where you ply your culinary craft alone. I climb upstairs to the rooftop terrace. Up there live brilliant lights and glorious colors, but you are not there. And the last poet to read is Dan Encarnacion. Dan is from Portland. Dan is the poet who designed this lovely cover. And Dan is also the coordinator of the Portland Poets. Dan just recently moved to Portland not too long ago and was a little bit hesitant about taking on the project of not knowing the city too well and this and that, but now everybody on the West Coast knows Dan. And Dan's bio is, his poem Tick is from an unpublished in verse entitled Rumba. Other poems from Rumba have been published online in Exquisite Corpse and 1111 and in print in the forthcoming spring issue of Berkeley Poetry Review. Dan.
Thank you, Toni. Sam and Toni mentioned that I designed the cover, that I had the privilege of doing that. And just wanted to say that I was so inspired by doing the cover that I got a little bit obsessive compulsive and designed 50 more covers. So we're set for the next few years. All we need are good poems and money. So reference to the donation jar, and just remember that this you got for free, and if it was in a store, you'd probably be paying as much as $10. So you got quite a deal. Okay, that's the PBS fundraising thing. Anyway, I was going to read Tick, but I decided to take you on a trip through 3 poems that can work as a triptych. The first one is called The Signal. The corner, the curb, the bovine-esque congestion, the cataract in cars, the signals, the switch of sentinel lights, the crosswalk strips, the quickened feet, the looking up, the long eye to eye, and the knowledge of knowing who each of us is, the caught, the slow to a halt, the populating asphalt, his double take, the rake, his arrowing gaze. I whip out a cig to caterpillar time, the delinquent dime the man had dropped. When he dug in his pocket and pulled out his lighter, how do I know? We know, we do. These lighters, so the history goes, once the signal, the sign, when dimes could buy you something that wasn't a small stale brick of hard pink gum, wasn't a 1/6 of unfiltered cigarette, not a 1/10 of a can of thin American beer, he would remember. He would have conspired, quick draw with the lighter. He was once me, an untapped Lucky Strike, an unstraddled Camel, an infidel bred Fatima, an unpolished old gold, rolled, packaged, and cellophane wrapped to be brought to one's lips, tasted, inhaled, absent-mindedly appreciated, then exhausted, then snuffed. Ashes and ashes, we all fall down. A snaking Jaten, a bold Bavarian beer, a gentrified room's soft white lit faced with frame-fine photographs of poor people not known. Festivus fiestaware effervescing drainers. Melon-mold walls, a sun-swallowing window, a side-winding breeze slithering stiff with rejuvenated city silt. A ceiling burnished with other men's post-ejaculate stares. He played me music, undistracting, yet pulsing. I sucked my post-coital cig speechlessly, slow to savor his attentions, to reward his determination and indicate my proclivity for patience. He reached for his wallet. No, this is not what I want. He reached for his wallet. Was that all that I was? He reached for his wallet to give me his card, and I hoped I did not look crushed, but I wanted to stay, and try to unskin my tongue, unshackle my jaw, ask him how he manages to continue when so many despise us. Next poem is called Passage, which was picked up for publication at Upstairs at Duroc. The epigram is Suffering Crawls by Gary Indiana from his novel Gone Tomorrow. The body is a foreboding city. Arteries circulating out our creature contradictions, pulsing out a monotonous rhythm pregnant with pitfall. Sleeper, sleep. Dreaming dreams the metabolism vulnerable, an immense dark bird flying man from shock. Itself an expansion of night, a moan parts. Midnight broad and thousands of organisms flicker, abandoning heaven's motionless sea. Falls a kaleidoscope of eyes. Rises tides of sound collecting, blood and hair intertwining, entangled mid-air, a distant hand arrests the elusive strands. A basso continuo movement. Layers of ourselves stretch. Within a quiet fetus like broken mummies, an overflowing sweep born of the collective squirm, curling undiminished, daydreaming, approaching, half-expected ships, countless as themselves. The mind prepares, the body starts. We become being, supply cells, possibilities before a gigantic peak. The last poem is called Cephalopods. It was inspired by Bertrand Bonello's film House of Tolerance and Proust. And when I read it, it'll sound like prose, but it is written in long lines of free verse. And the epigram is, with the stark lucidity of a future recollection, by Vladimir Nabokov from Lolita. Madeline, the Jewess, the woman who laughs, her cheeks sliced, then stitched into a mad clown grin, a harlequin whore who dreamed the night prior to her defeminization, her future butcher's sperm swell peristaltically through his phallus, up her sex-burning torso and throat, out her eyes. Another man would later release the sperm that she would cry, would slide down slow across her scars into her mouth. The effect was captivating, a film with ephemerality that's pierced and drew. Consuming in execution, metaphorically fertile, repellently hexing, difficult to determine if it were CGI or a pearly, mucilaginous milk the director had forced into his actress's open eyes. The opaque tears dripped indelibly real, and when the bead adhered to her lip and curled in between, I too could taste the salty warm sap slip thick through the seam of my own sealed mouth. We were beach camping below Mendocino at the mouth of the Navarro. His red pop-top 68 VW camper or carapace. He was blue blood, silver spooned out Connecticut wasp. Though not a hippie, he had weathered the Aquarian downpour of music and peace at Woodstock. He'd survived a squealing siren strain of prepubescent girls when the Beatles first erupted on Ed Sullivan's stage. He didn't find it of enough significance to tell the tale of how he and his schoolmates reacted when they had first heard word that bright fall day that the pert President Kennedy was dead. The VW camper was his youth, his mature vehicular pride shelled in a burgundy 750 BMW with a personalized plate that proclaimed him 007. He liked to tell me that when we went out he carried a small pistol. In that red pop-top VW camper, 17 years before, he had driven the European continent while a Cambridge student during the dawn of the 70s. Now the late 80s, with me shotgun, we were having our first and only weekend trip together. The first and only time he would sleep a night with me. At 21, my first night entirely spent beside a man. From my supine state, the moon shone sieved through the weave of the coarse cotton drapes drawn across the wide encircling windows. Outside, the surf pushed and pulled, sculling a lulling Sisyphean drone. His head in silhouette, he straddled, sat upon my chest, and shot himself over my face, across my lips, into my eye. It stung, my eye having never before encountered such an assault. And instead of relishing his display of intimacy, I groped for anything to clean out my eye and griped that he could have warned me. My hand landed on some rough paper towels, the kind you find in public restrooms, and with them scratched my eye dry. I heard a grumbling of annoyance that I was loath to appreciate his impassioned gift. With her cheeks ripped wide and her scars never fully healed, Madeline was relegated to performing as no more than a maid, laundering, cooking, consoling, coaching the brothel whores to provide confidence to their clients, unless there dallied those men who wished to consort with deformities. I wonder, now and then, what dreams people had before ball bearings and cotton mills were invented. Sylvia Plath wrote in her story Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams. Wilfredo Naledo, in But for the Lovers, wrote, "What a splendor to a savage." And in The Tenants of Moonbloom, Edward Lewis Walland surmised, they were attracted by his being behind glass. Words and word splinter from buried passages, thrusting up, splattering against the pane, with the moon-juried misadventure and passion chalked as dead. Another figure fallen, trapped between our tracks, our weekend retreat derailed. The next day in Mendocino, he stopped to buy a gift for his Japanese girlfriend. He had told me of her. I noticed his credit card. His embossed first name was not the name I knew. On our way to find a different campsite, I asked if the name on his credit card was his birth name. He replied it was his father's card. Left it at that. Tight-lipped. Pushing 40 years and a vice president of marketing for the Pacific Rim region of an international corporation, and he's charging to his father's credit. Resigned that he would mold more mistruths, I bit my doubt. We continued going south along the Pacific Coast Highway, the cliffs edging the ocean dropping down out my window. After silence, and pulling through a high, sharp curve where the sky was the only thing visible beyond the windscreen, he blurted, "That's the way I would want to go." "What are you talking about?" I said. "When I die," he explained, "I'd want to die driving off a cliff. I'd ignore the turn and just keep flying." What is splendor to a savage? They were attracted by his being behind glass. I wonder, now and then, what dreams people had before ball bearings and cotton mills were invented. There was no elaboration of his desire for an Icarian death or mere metaphor. Madeline had dared to reveal to her future butcher, unaware of his mold intentions, the rhapsodical nocturne she'd reveled in that had insinuated her pertinacious sperm. Her dream completely recounted, as a prelude to their complicity, he presented her a single, large emerald. She acquiesced when he asked if he could tie her down, her limbs immobilized, spread across the bed. I dreamed of octopi, suckers pulsing my cheeks. More large-eyed octopi surfaced at arm's length before me, striking their shifting pigment dance, hypnotic in their alarm for interminable camouflage. Leathery tentacles gripped tight my face, my gaze in the rictus of their broadening beaks. He refused to show me precisely where he lived. He had me pick him up on a street corner. To his neighbors, he could explain a visit from a cocky knife and fork adept Caucasian frat boy, but not a boyish Pacific brown-skinned calculating, his word, undergrad. When we'd set out for bouts of rigorous drinking, he would insist I drive, even when we took his car. At the bar, he would strike conversation with other men, but he wouldn't introduce me. He said I could do that myself. They were attracted to his being behind glass. I wonder now and then what dreams people had before ball bearings and cotton mills were invented. What is splendor to a savage? Madeline became the favorite of a client who demanded her charms due to the violence performed upon her face. He wished to save her from despair. He took her to a party where she was to orgy with lesbians, dwarves, and others thought deformed while witnessed by the rich. Madeline maintained allegiance to her home of tolerance. She, with the other whores, when the brothel was pressed to close from high rent, dissipated into the crevices of the coercing Parisian streets. On our drive back home, he informed me he had forgotten to pack the necessary amount of underwear changes, and beneath his shorts there was nothing to keep his junk, my term, from flopping about. A timorous attempt to bait me into entertaining him while he drove. The octopi looked upon me with the provocation of an omniscient being, the large eyes absorbing all the light that reflected off, refracted through and nimbused about me, penetrating, scrutinizing, processing those incandescent rays to develop a relief map of eviscerating faults. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, hang out, finish off the food. Anyone who would like to be on the email list for third Saturday readings, just give me your email.